Welcome to Emerging Franchise Brands, the podcast that introduces you to the visionary founders of America's fastest growing franchise opportunities. We'll also hear from industry pros as they share insights on what it really takes to achieve the elusive milestone of 100 plus locations. I am your host, Frank Fiume, founder of I9 Sports, and my 20-year journey from inception to acquisition has given me a unique perspective on how to succeed in franchising. Join me as we welcome today's guest. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Emerging Franchise Brands podcast. On today's show, I have the author of the best-selling Amazon book, Franchise Fame, Dani Peleva. Dani, how are you?
I'm very well, thank you. I'm glad to be here.
Thanks for being on the show. Well, let's start out by, why don't you share with the audience, first of all, what inspired you to write this book? It's a fantastic book.
Thank you. Well, I've been in franchising and franchise marketing for over 14 years now, and I felt that there's quite a lot of knowledge that I gained through my journey. I started working as a brand and marketing manager, franchisor side, the first few years, and that's how I got introduced to franchising and franchise marketing. And then I decided to venture out and run my own franchise, so I bought into the franchise model. So seeing both sides of the coin, franchisor and franchisee, I thought, well, I've gained a lot of knowledge now, and this is how I identified gaps in the market, and I thought, why not write about everything that I experienced and share it with the audience?
That's awesome. Well, going back to your experience, I read your book, and I love the beginning, how you share, you worked for this startup, I guess, right? And where everybody, of course, like in any startup, everybody does everything, and you guys were growing like crazy. Things were kind of, I guess, a bit, if I could say, out of control at times, right?
Absolutely, yes. It was manic.
And then it was, we're going to franchise this. So what was life like when you guys went from this crazy startup, fast growth into franchising, kind of that transition?
So you hit the nail on the head with this. It was absolutely chaotic, and I was doing everything from invoicing contractors to doing marketing to creating a marketing photo shoot with some actors to chasing payments and all of that. So at some point we saw in the business that the business was lacking consistency in service delivery and also in customer service. We're using contractors who did not really care for the business but just deliver the service. So we thought, hang on a minute, we do want to be this best company in the home service sector. We do want to be the best. We want to show consistency, and we think franchising is the way. So franchising out and migrating to this model changed the whole business and for the better, and it helped it scale from a few £100,000 business to a few £1 million business. Wow.
We always say in franchising that franchising has a funny way of finding us. And you have a fascinating story growing up in Bulgaria in a small village, which I think kind of leads to your why, on why you do what you do. Would you share sort of your beginnings and your parents and the inspiration there?
Sure, and that's a very personal moment, and I came to the realization of what my why was when I started writing the book. And funnily enough, you learn a lot about yourself when writing your own book. Mm-hmm. So I started thinking about, where does this passion comes from? Why am I so passionate about franchise marketing and helping smaller businesses succeed? And I started digging, and this was a memory that I almost blocked out because I was very young. I should have been 6 or 7 the most when my parents, they're both teachers, and back then having a teaching career in Bulgaria was quite difficult. They were barely making ends meet, so they decided to start their own business. My dad is also an engineer, so they started their luxury furniture manufacturing company, and they had this brilliant products, absolutely brilliant kitchens and tables and chairs, and my dad and mom put their heart into the business. However, what they struggled with was actually the business side of things and marketing their brilliant product. How do you go to market with a product that's so good? And unfortunately, a few years later, they had to shut down the company because it wasn't successful. While they were running 2 jobs and working from 8 a.m. till 10 p.m., I was the one that had to do all the chores, cook, clean, look after my younger sister. So I was trying to contribute and help in a very subconscious, innocent child way. However, them failing and not making it through with the business, I almost forgot about that memory. It was very recent thing when I wrote the book that it came back to me. It's almost like the little Dani nowadays tries to help her parents, or because she couldn't help her parents, she helps other businesses, and that's how she, makes up for those times.
Yeah, that's fascinating, because your story really resonates with so many people I know that they're watching or listening to this podcast because they've had that own experience, either seeing their parents or the family members running a business, because we know that obviously the percentage of people that fail in business is so high. There's so many reasons why. I mean, look, your parents, as you said, they had a great product, but sometimes it doesn't even matter how great your product is. Of course, if you can't get the word out, then it's kind of irrelevant, right?
That's absolutely right. And if had they had the structure of franchising, or someone giving them the business in a box, as we call it, they would have made it. I'm sure that they would have. If they had, the marketing, the sales side and everything structured like franchising does, they would have made it. But unfortunately, they didn't. And that's why they struggled. And I believe this is rooted in my why. This is why I believe in franchising so much, because it's a method and a structure and a way for people to succeed.
Yeah. Well, in your book, Dani, you talk about the 5 F's model. And so why don't we kind of dive into that? Because it's the crux of the book. And I think it's also particularly most important for new franchisors to hear this. So why don't we tackle one at a time here? Having a fantastic reputation. Now, we know that's obvious, but why did you list that one first? What was your thoughts on making that the first F?
So this goes back historically. After I became a franchisee, I had a successful period of 3-4 years running the franchise. And then I decided that I do want to go back to marketing, because I'm a marketer and marketing was always my passion. And I identified, seeing franchisor and franchisee side, I identified this gap in the market. So that's how I created the franchise marketing agency that I run today. And from working for over 14 years in the marketing field and in franchise marketing, I've seen a lot of errors and I've seen a lot of common kind of patterns that franchisors and Z's do. And I think one of the biggest errors or the shortcomings that they do is that they don't pay that much attention to their reputation. They don't understand how important, almost detrimental for their success that can be. And that starts from collecting positive signals and reviews to your business, also to answering negative ones, how to deal with unhappy customers, how to deal with happy customers, how to encourage positive reviews. And even more so lately, we've seen from a very SEO marketing perspective, we see that in Google nowadays, the more positive reviews you have on your Google My Business listing, the better your performance is in terms of SEO and rankings on first page in Google. So even more so, you should be looking after, safeguarding, and actively managing your reputation.
And the reputation goes beyond just from franchisee to the consumer front facing, right? The reputation is really us as the franchisor to the franchisee. And obviously, if we don't have a great reputation, it's going to hinder franchise sales, and it's going to limit expanding our network.
Absolutely. And this reminds me of what I heard from a mentor of mine many years ago, and it just stayed. You are in partnership with everyone who touches the business. And that is franchisees, customers, vendors. So your relationships with any of that players and stakeholders in your network is essential for your success. And it could be bad reputation amongst vendors. It could be bad reputation amongst your franchisees that are going to hinder your franchise sales. It could be clients if you're a franchisee, and that will also have a negative impact on this location, but also the whole network and the whole brand name in general. So that's why I decided to exactly stress on reputation first, because people seem to forget about it.
Yeah.
It's a simple error.
And for most of our audience, I think there are a lot of emerging founders that are part of our audience, and it's important for them to know that the franchise community is very small, despite how many franchisors there are, right? It's about 4,000 of us. So you need to make sure that you keep your reputation intact, because it's going to hurt you even from the standpoint of how you're perceived in franchising, bringing on new employees, bringing on a leadership team. Yeah, word gets around really, really quick on how well you treat people.
That's
and
correct.
what you stand for.
Absolutely so.
So let's move on to number 2. Franchise network is the second F.
Okay, so yeah, franchise network is the network of franchisees that you surround yourself with. And we've heard this many times, franchising being compared to a marriage or dating, because it's a matchmaking process. And a lot of the franchisors out there are just so focused on selling the franchise. And I think that's in itself is a flawed concept. You should be looking to partner up with someone, not necessarily sell, but they also need to sell themselves to you, because you're entrusting the rights of your brand to them. So it's are they suitable for me? But am I suitable for them as well? So it's a two-way process rather than just selling one directional.
It's true. And it is a balance, because as we start out as a franchisor, we're trying to keep the lights on by selling franchises, but at the same time, we want them to be the right person. And I know many times we've talked about on this podcast with other guests how, those first dozen franchisees really set the culture for what your franchise network is going to look like. And also, who becomes a franchisee early on in your system doesn't really look like the same type of franchisee when you have number 100, right? Those first franchisees are going to be bigger risk takers, whereas somebody that is your 100th franchisee is going to look vastly different. And quite honestly, they never would have been your first franchisee because they wanted to make sure you had your act together and had systems and processes in place that your first dozen were like, we'll figure it out together, right?
Correct. And the first few franchisees are going to be, it's the chemistry. Is there any chemistry between you? Do they trust you even though you're a new franchisor and you're just starting out? And what I advise in the book is always have an ideal buyer persona or an ideal franchisee avatar. Even if you're just starting out now, create a few and think about John Doe or Jane Doe or a next third ideal franchisee avatar, and list out all the qualities and skill set and background information and demographics and anything you can think of, because you need to know who you're looking for so that you can shortlist the candidates, so that you can set your campaigns and target with your marketing message correctly the people you'd like to attract, and not just shoot in the dark. Because a lot of franchisors think, my franchise is so simple, the concept is so simple that anyone can do it. All right, yes, probably so, but you still need to focus on a particular group.
Right. Okay, now this is a part of frustration, though, for early franchisors. If I was listening to this conversation in 2003 that we're currently having, I would have listened and said, okay, I got it. I know what that persona is, who that avatar is, and I had it wrong. And I think when we're starting out as a franchisor, for those founders that are listening to this, it's okay to have, I think you hit the nail on the head, have multiple avatars, have multiple personas on what you think it might be, because what you think it may be early on may be vastly different. In my case, I thought it was somebody who liked sports. Does sports really have anything to do with running a business, though? Of course not. But I liked sports, so I thought, well, they're going to work hard as me. If they like sports, they're going to do well at it. And I found that the people who like sports were, in my case, were the worst franchisees. The best performing franchisees actually had business acumen and understood that they were satisfying the business of sports by providing a great service to the families and making sure that the parents were happy with the convenience of our programs and the safety, and the kids were having fun, all of those things. But we always talked about marketing, management, operations, finance. In the office, we didn't talk about home runs or touchdowns or goals, right?
Yeah, correct. And I think you said it yourself, getting things wrong the first time is absolutely fine. It's good to have an idea of who you're targeting, albeit this being wrong, and you targeting that market, trying for yourself that this is wrong, and then moving to your next avatar until you refine it. And this is going to change inevitably. The first few years, the franchisee avatar is going to be different from number 100 franchisee, as you said yourself. But trialing and erroring and making an error is part of the process, rather than just spreading it out there, shooting with no direction. It's almost like you're shooting in the dark.
Right. The ability to pivot, like how important is that as a new franchisor, especially when it comes to, having that persona?
Crucial. Yeah. Absolutely crucial.
Yeah. Let's move on to the third one. So a focused team. I love this one.
I love it too because when I was younger and growing up as a professional myself, I used to fall in the pitfall of thinking I am the only person that can do it best.
Oh, yes.
Haven't we all? So I wanted to do everything myself. I wanted to do it my way. And delegating was just such a difficult thing to do. And I know a lot of the franchisors who are probably listening that were successful business owners and are shifting towards franchising now are going to find it difficult because it's almost like having two hats. The business owner running a successful business and then a franchisor role that is completely different and separate. And people mix those two and they spend little attention to the franchisor role and too much on the business or the other way around. But these are two separate roles. And without help, you're not going to be able to do it on your own.
Yeah, for sure. And delegating doesn't mean abdicating. You're just going, okay, you've got this. No, there has to be a checks and balances. You talked more about this focus team, and it might have been actually in the beginning of that chapter where you mentioned team burnout. And that resonated with me and my team because we were going in every different direction, trying to keep up with the amount of demand that we had and trying to keep up with the amount of changes that we needed to implement. And as the leader of the company, you have to keep your pulse right, not only just on the business, but how is your team doing? You're checking in with them and making sure that they're not burned out. And let's face it, when you're starting out, you're just doing everything. And we're not really keeping track of the clock because we do whatever it takes. But how do we make sure that our team doesn't burn out?
Well, first of all, you need to make sure that you don't burn out as a franchisor because you're taking on too much and you end up working 60, 80 hours, weekends, and your family is suffering, your personal life is suffering. And we see that way too often because you want to succeed, which is fine. Being highly motivated and driven is absolutely fine to an extent, because if you don't protect yourself and think about yourself first, there won't be a business. You are the franchisor. You're the head of the business. So finding that team, and that might look as half a person a week, or meaning 4 hours a week or 4 hours a day person, to a full-time operations manager once you have a few franchisees, to a franchisor, head of franchising, or it doesn't have to be hiring a 5 or 10 people team right away from the start. You could be having help with freelancers. You could be having help with a family member. Just asking for help is the first thing that you need to admit, and understanding that it's okay to ask for help. It's okay and to not be able to do it all because it's a lot.
Yeah.
And then thinking about your team.
Yeah. So essentially, it's about giving up control and being okay with it, which is difficult for some people, right?
It was very difficult for me.
Yeah. It's difficult for probably a lot of franchisors. That's why it's so difficult for franchisors to succeed. And they have to realize the only way to succeed in franchising is giving up control. And for people like us, because I did have that same mentality where nobody could do it as good as I could. But I realized as I was getting burned out and frustrated, that my motto changed to, okay, if somebody could do it 70% as good as me and the job gets done, it was good enough, which was hard because I was this perfectionist. And what I came to find out is I started hiring really good people who were much better than me. So forget them being only 70% as good as me. I was maybe 70% as good as them.
Absolutely. And in the book, I talk about surrounding yourself with A players.
Yes.
So building a team of people who align with you in terms of values, integrity, ethics, who share your passion for the business, who want to help you grow, is important, because those are the people and the team that is going to communicate with your franchisees, is going to build the culture of the business. So making sure that you don't compromise on how you build that team and whom is part of it, it's very important.
You know what's so fascinating too? I've talked to so many emerging founders, and so many of them have done it the same way I did it, it is frustrating, is you start out with this bottom up kind of organization where it's the founder and they have a whole bunch of people that they could afford, which is not much. And so you have this really, really flat organization chart, and it becomes really, really challenging because if you don't have A players, you're going to run into a lot of trouble. And then you get to the point where either you're going to go out of business or you're going to really limit your success, where you have to flip the switch and say, I need to start hiring from the top down. And when you make that change, your business has changed forever. I know that happened in my case, that once I started being able to bring on a president and CEO, that was money so well spent. But you don't think that, right? When you're starting out, you think you just can't afford it.
Yeah, absolutely. At the beginning, and that's absolutely fine. At the beginning, when you're looking to sign up your first franchisee and just to validate the concept, it's okay that you don't have money for an A-player team, or it's okay. That's why I said there's the options of freelancing are out there. If you need a copywriter, you can hire someone for a few bucks online. If you need someone to do your website, you can hire someone. If you need some operations advice and so on, there's people that offer that for free in franchise groups and communities. You don't need to actually hire expensive staff at the beginning, but the first shift is exactly as you said, admitting that you can't do it yourself, and there's other people that are better qualified than you.
Sure. They're certainly out there. All right, let's get into your wheelhouse, the marketing side of it. So number 4 is a full funnel.
All right, and I can talk about this for
Let's
days.
go. All right.
Right, so there's a few ways of looking at this. For franchisors, a full funnel means a full funnel of leads of potential franchisees and people who want to buy into your model. And for franchisees, that means, having a steady flow of end customers. So this is why the book is suitable for franchisees and franchisors both. And for franchisors, of course, you want to first start with the reputation, because no one's going to buy a franchise from you if you have really poor reputation and a lot of your franchisees, ex and current ones, are slagging you. So that is important. But secondly, how do you build that funnel of leads? Do you have a concept? First, the franchising concept that is validated and proved, and have you signed up your first franchisee? And that's okay if you haven't. Through channels such as Google Ads, social media, your own website, which is your own media, and other channels, you can create and build this hype and build your brand online so that people can buy into your model. But the first and foremost, you need to know exactly what you offer and have a really well combined package with all the USPs. Because, as you said yourself, there's so many franchisors out there, 4,000 in the US alone, and there's a lot of noise in the market. Why would someone pick you instead of another similar brand? Why would they want to work with you? Even if you don't have that proven track record of 10, 20 locations already. So you were a successful business beforehand. Why were you successful? What made you different? How are you going to support them? And I think a potential franchisee wants to not only know what they're getting for their money, but they want to establish that connection, that chemistry with the franchisor, and to know that he's got their back at all times. Whatever problem they come across, he's going to be there or she's going to be there to have their back and help them and support them so that they succeed.
That's great. I think this really validates what you said earlier about franchise reputation being key, because if you think about who is typically the first franchisee or franchisees of a franchise,
your customers.
Right, your customer. They're the ones willing to take a chance on you because they've already took a chance on you, as opposed to just being one of 4,000 franchisors in the U.S. trying to get the same eyeballs, right, to try to become a franchisee. And that's probably where some emerging franchisors go wrong. They think they're going to just throw a whole lot of money into franchise marketing and they're going to go after competing with all the other brands, which is really they're fishing in the wrong pond, right?
Correct. Because your ideal franchise avatar that you've already established and you wrote down could be anywhere from found from your team members, your family members, extended relatives, customers, and those can be the ideal first few franchisees that are only going to validate your concept. But to speak a little bit more on the marketing side for newly open locations as well, to have a steady lead of customers for first, second, third location, you need to really push on local marketing. And that's the secret. And it's not really a secret because any location-specific business, which franchising is, should focus on local marketing. And with all the tools that we have and all the AI, Google, Facebook, all of the digital platforms out there, you really have no excuse but to really push and master your local marketing. And I mean Google My Business, local service ads, all of these almost free products that allow for a local business to market and advertise themselves and build their brand of and their local customers.
And mastering this is so important because when you're bringing on a franchisee, you need to get them up and running as fast as possible. And the only way you're going to award more franchises is if they're successful, right? So it really comes down to the local marketing. So is that one of the recommendations that you have, is to start with mastering the local marketing before the big picture marketing?
Absolutely.
For the franchisor?
Yes, because that is the most cost effective. The lowest cost per lead comes from local marketing and Google My Business. And for us, working in this field for more than 14 years, as I said, that's our top service that we offer for franchises, local marketing through Google My Business, making sure that every single location is on page one for that search. Whether you are a handyman business and someone is searching for a handyman in, let's say, St. Petersburg, Florida, you need to be on there, first page, first result under the map, so that people can click on you and call you or ask for driving directions to, if you're a retail center, or go to your website and make a booking or fill out the quote request form and so on. And again, on Google My Business, what is the first thing that you see on the listing? How many stars that business has, that location. Again, it feeds back to our point about reputation.
Is that, you think, the most significant challenge that emerging franchise founders have?
Being discoverable
on the marketing
yes,
side. Yeah,
absolutely. So once they've franchised out and they've gone through the hectic process of, writing the ops manual and the FDD and everything else, because it can be overwhelming.
It is.
And it's costly. And then it's almost like they expect a huge line of potential customers lining up on their first pilot store, or the same with potential franchise buyers. They expect the calls to be coming in and people to be lining in to buy into the franchise model. Well, that's not going to happen unless you've done the work. And that's the groundwork.
I think what they're missing, and I'm speaking from experience, is as when we start franchising our company, we have to, of course, get the FDD done. We think about the operations manual. We're instructed by our consultants to, take all the systems and processes and everything you've put in place, get it in writing. And by the time we get to marketing, there's so much fatigue that has already set in, right? We've jumped through all these legal hoops and operations hoops, but the most important part is getting customers. If we don't have franchisees, we have nothing. And I think as a franchisor, we probably spend too much time trying to cross our T's and dot our I's on the operations side. But if you have sales, you have nothing.
Yeah, absolutely right. A business does not exist without sales. And a lot of the franchises brands that we work with that are emerging in different countries, they also start with owning their first location themselves, owning the first pilot store, or owning, the first franchisee, so that they can actually validate the concept, take the risk themselves, say, well, this is the area that we actually run. This is our pilot store, as we call it, and it's worked. And now we want to scale it up, and now we want to sell it. So this is also an option. Nice.
All right, let's end about number 5 of the 5 F model, and it's finding the fit.
Yeah, finding the right fit. And I touched upon that a bit earlier about the marriage and the dating, and how a lot of franchisors fall in the common pitfall of selling to anyone just because they want to start getting some funds in after franchising the business, and spending a lot of time on that and a lot of money, of course. So finding the right fit comes from, first of all, knowing who you want to partner up with, but also being really, really, not compromising on what you want, and not compromising on who you want to be in partnership with. Because we've heard that so often, a huge lawsuit with a franchisee that failed. One compromise because you wanted to get that franchise fee and onboard someone, and you were not patient, or you were not very picky, and you knew deep down, that candidate's not that suitable, because you always do, but you kind of you're like, oh, I want to make an exception. I want to sign that deal badly. That can cost you a lot later on.
Listen to your gut.
Yeah, absolutely.
I hope franchisors are listening to this. I'm going to say this, and I hope they don't forget, and that is pay now or pay much more later. When you bring on that franchisee that you know, I don't think they're the right fit, you know they're not the right fit, don't bring them on. I promise you, you listen to your gut, because you will pay like 10x to getting them out of the system.
Correct. It's the same with the red flags in dating. If there's too many red flags, do not go out on a second date.
Right. Well, how about to relate to that, when a potential franchisee comes into a discovery day, it's like a date. They put their best foot forward. This is as good as it's ever going to get. It's only downhill from there. And maybe not totally downhill, but they want to make the best impression, right?
It's like a job interview. You want
It is totally a job interview.
To start well and to present yourself in the best light possible. And if you see that they don't really care for that meeting, or they didn't prepare, or they didn't do their due diligence, or they didn't do their homework, if you ask them to prepare something or a business plan or whatever your process is, if they didn't put in the work, do you really want to be in a relationship with such a person for this long? Because usually the franchise agreement lasts for at least 10 years, right?
Right.
So do you want to have someone in your house for this long? Do you want to entrust your brand to someone like that? I wouldn't.
Well, number one, they're not going to validate well to other potential franchisees. And number two, good luck trying to sell a franchise anywhere remotely near them, because if they're not doing a good enough job, they're certainly not going to be a great brand ambassador. Nobody's going to want a franchise around them.
Correct. And getting them out is going to cost you a lot. You said it yourself.
Yeah. Let's talk about maybe examples of your book where, you've highlighted maybe a successful implementation of some of these marketing strategies. You don't have to name any particular franchisor, but can you share maybe a case study or maybe a success story that where you've implemented this?
Sure. So we're global. We have presence in 55 countries, and a big majority of our clients come from Central America, the US, all over Europe, Australia as well. So this is a case study with an Australian client a few years ago. They had about 23 locations back then. Mm-hmm. And when we started working with them, their Google My Business and listings were all over the place. Nobody was maintaining them. Nobody was looking after the reviews. And we know that an unhappy client is 10 times more likely to complain and leave a negative review than a happy one to leave a positive review. So the average score of their listings was very average. Under 3 stars. There was information all over the web with like old phone numbers, and it was just a very messy case, and they were struggling. Mm-hmm. They were struggling. And when they started working with us, they trialed our services with one location. That was the CEO's location. We didn't know that back then.
Oh, wow.
It was a secret. But then once they've seen that in 3 months' time, we managed to bring about 350% increase in the number of leads that came into that location, phone calls, driving directions, and inquiries from the website. They were like, wow, this really makes a difference. What we did was we took ownership of the listing. We cleaned up all the information online. We registered the business in a lot of local directories. Mm-hmm. We created this immaculate profile in Google My Business. We made sure that the business ranks for every single keyword for the area that it was in. So if someone searches for their service, any of the products that they offer with the area, they were ranking on page 1 in the top 3 results under the map. So that generated a lot of phone calls and driving directions and footfall to the business. Once they've seen that growth for one location, they signed up the whole network. 10 years later, we still work with them. Just because they know how much this means for them. It completely turned the business. They now have 37 locations and they continue to grow. But local marketing and Google My Business is the one thing that every single franchisor, mm-hmm. should take on and manage from the head office for their franchisees, because this is free. Google provides that for free for every local business, and also it brings the lowest cost per lead and cost per acquisition for for new customers. So before you even spend a penny or a dollar on ads on Facebook, Google, or whatever, make sure that your Google My Business listing ranks on page 1 for all the keywords that a potential customer might search you for. And that would be a game changer.
That is brilliant. So maybe we need to go back to basics. I'm thinking about the audience. A lot of people might not understand what Google My Business is, and they're just thinking, okay, so Dani's company has, they crank up my budget here on Google paid ads, and that's really not what this is. So maybe you can talk about that misconception.
Sure. So Google My Business is the old name of Google Business Profiles. They renamed it recently. And what that is Google gives you the opportunity to create a listing completely free of charge for your business if your business is a local business associated with an area, service area, or you have a physical location somewhere. And if you type in, for example, hairdresser in Miami, based on your GPS signal, whether you're typing this in your iPhone or on your iPad or computer, it picks up on where you are when you're making that search, and it gives you the local providers or local vendors. So it will show you all the nearby hairdressers from the location you are. And this is Google My Business. This is Google Maps searches.
Now that's on the franchisee side, right, of local businesses. Let's shift gears now to on the franchisor side of attracting high quality franchisee leads. What strategies do you recommend for emerging franchisors?
So after you really know what you're selling and you've formed the franchise package and how you stand out from your competitors, we always recommend making sure that you're present in more than just one places or spaces online. Of course, you should have your own franchise page about the franchise opportunity. However, in marketing, we have this concept that a user or a person has to interact or see a brand 5 to 7 times before they decide to engage with it, which means that they need to see 5 to 7 times your brand, especially if you're an emerging brand and they don't know you and they never heard about you, before they even make an inquiry. So what does this mean in practice? So they might see a Facebook ad, which is fine, but they're not going to right away make an inquiry. You can plant the seed about the franchise opportunity. You can introduce the business and the brand on Facebook, and they'll see the ad. They might even click on it and come to your website, but they will probably not make an inquiry because they don't know who you are. But you've planted the seed. Then through remarketing, they can see that ad or that banner following them on third-party websites, almost like that pair of shoes that I didn't buy that keeps coming back to me.
Right.
And then if they decide to really look for a franchise opportunity, where are they going to go? They're not going to go back to Facebook and search for you. They're probably going to Google and search for the type of franchise that you are, or they're going to just search for franchise opportunities in that state they are. So it's important for you to be on there with your own website, but also to be present in third-party websites such as franchise directories. When someone with high purchase intent who's already decided that they want to invest in buying a business go on a third-party directory website and they see your brand there for another second, third time, fourth time, that only shows more credibility and authority and shows that you are investing in your own brand and you are a credible brand. You're out there. You're vetted, so to speak. So being present in as many as possible of those franchise portals is also helpful. It might just help for credibility, and they might still convert on your own franchising website. They might come to the website and still send you an inquiry and request a more info pack from your website, but making sure that they've seen the brand 5 to 7 times before they download a brochure, before they request an information pack is important.
What do you think it takes now for a U.S.-based franchisor, an emerging brand, from a budget perspective for franchise development?
That would depend very much on the industry, of course, and how many states the opportunity is available, because the more states you want to advertise in, the higher the budget needed. And of course, hospitality, the F&B sector, opening a restaurant location will be very different from starting a franchise in the service sector, for example. And different investment is required. But I would say on average, say $3,000 to $4,000 in advertising spend would be needed to close one location, and that's again very positive, positive forecast.
And what's your thought on the web portals nowadays?
A lot of the web portals promise a lot and under-deliver. We try to under-promise and over-deliver because Franchise Fame also offers a web portal and a franchise directory, and we launched ours on the 1st of January of this year. So we just literally started in the US market.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Great.
So I would say make sure that you have manageable expectations when you agree to advertise on one of those portals, and make sure you understand what you get. Every franchisor wants those portals to give them guarantees of minimum leads per month, but that's not really possible.
Sure.
And if someone promises you something firmly, they're probably lying to you, or they're probably giving you some leads that are not going to be very highly qualified. So working with a third party, whether that's a broker or a franchise marketing agency or a directory like that, it's important to manage your expectations and also understand how they can help you, and make sure that also you see that that business is invested in understanding your concept. You're not just one of many, but they really want to understand what you offer, what your unique selling points are, so that they know exactly who to target. And this is where, again, your ideal franchise avatar comes in play, because you need to be able to give a few avatars to those people so that they can actually understand who you target.
Sure. What's your thoughts on emerging franchisors bringing on a PR firm early on in the process?
I think that adds a lot of value to building the brand, because let's face it, no one's ever heard of you at first, and you expecting them to give you a lump amount of money is not realistic. So investing in your brand and building more credibility, again, that would be a touch point from those 5 to 7 touch points. If someone reads about you in the press, this will be, this business is legit. Why not? Let me just see what they offer. So that will help. But realistically, not many franchisors have the budget to work with PR companies.
Right.
But I'm all for it because, again, it adds on to the marketing mix. And the more channels you cover, the more often they see you. Even if it's a billboard or a franchise flyer or a very fancy franchise brochure, it all adds up.
Yeah, it comes down to obviously the budget, and whether you could afford it or not. I don't think we would ever dispute whether PR is a good thing or not. It comes down to, does it fit in my budget as part of the mix now or later on? What about the trade shows? What's going on? What are your thoughts on these franchise trade shows? Are they making a comeback now, or are people getting deals done, or is it just another place? Obviously, you get exposure, but is it really people getting the ROI on those?
I think they are. From what I understand from franchisors and from what I've seen in participating and just being out there and at shows, I see that there's a lot more interest in the last couple of years, and a lot more people with interest to invest wisely are there. So a lot of our clients and franchisors have very positive experiences at franchise shows, depending on the show, of course, and depending whether you're like international brand or domestic and so on. But the last couple of years, we can see a big comeback, and halls are full, exhibition halls are full, people are interested. And it's almost like people want to invest smartly now rather than just keep their money and their savings in the bank. So I think it's definitely something that should be explored by emerging franchise brands.
It's interesting. It's almost like it's the touch point of the, face-to-face, the trade show became important again. That was the way like so many franchisors sold franchises back in the 80s, right? 90s and early 2000s, it started to wane. And we didn't do many of them. I think maybe in 03, 04. By 2005, 2006, it was like all web portals. We just got a ton of leads. It was garbage in, garbage out. If you converted, a 0.5%, that was pretty much our close rate on a web portal lead. But it seemed like post-COVID specifically, the trade shows have made this comeback. And maybe part of it also is not just people wanting to get out and be face-to-face, but maybe it's also there's just so many franchisors out there. And it's almost like people are overwhelmed by the amount of opportunity that they see online, that by going to the trade show and having that face-to-face contact, it's allowed them to be able to engage in maybe a deeper conversation, like, do I even like this person, as opposed to what the front-facing website looks like, and getting the whole disguise of the marketing side of it versus really getting down to meeting somebody and knowing whether, you're interested maybe doing business with them.
Are we a good fit?
Yeah.
Is there chemistry between us? Exactly. That side of the things that you can't really feel out over a Zoom call or website through a website or a brochure is very important. So yeah, after the pandemic, that was a game changer. And the last few years, that's exactly what most of franchisors say. But again, there's so many of those shows, so you need to be very smart at picking the right shows that are going to be suitable for you, locally probably,
right,
or specific for your industry.
Yeah. All right. Well, we know that digital marketing, first and foremost, you have to have that down pat. Now, there's a lot of different strategies. You talked about Google My Business, of course, but if you had to maybe prioritize for a newer franchisor starting out to maximize the impact, what would you say are maybe some of the 3 or 4 things that an emerging franchisor needs to do on the digital side?
You need to have a very well optimized website. And by well optimized, what I mean is make sure that you don't get the basics wrong. A website that loads under 2 seconds is now essential. If your website takes long to load, you're going to lose that user that wanted to come and see your website. That also impacts negatively on your SEO performance. Make sure that your website is not just fancy photos and fake photos, because a lot of people still buy stock images and think this is what the audience wants to see. No, they want real people, real faces, real business interactions, real videos from franchisees or a franchisee that you already have that is a success story, a case study. Content is also very important, not only visual, but also copy in terms of what the website says, because again, this is how your website is positioned in Google in terms of SEO performance. So if you want to stand a chance ranking for solar panel installation franchise opportunity or whatever your business is, make sure that, that says it on the tin. In your website, you've got good SEO friendly content. I would say in terms of channels that you need to invest, again, because you're an emerging brand, you need to invest in the top of the funnel, which is education stage, where you need to put yourself out there to the audience that you specifically target from your franchise audience and an avatar, and make sure that on social media you create those advertising messages that are going to resonate. And that's not going to convert. That's not the conversion stage. This is planting the seed stage, the educational stage, where, hey, this is me, this is what I offer, give me a chance or consider me as an opportunity. Conversion is never going to happen on social media, or very rarely. But then later on, in 2-3 months, whenever their boss pisses them off, or their wife says, aren't we going to run our own business one day? I want to buy this house or whatever. Once they decide to act, that they're ready to invest, they're going to go on Google and search for the franchise opportunity. So being on Google ads as well as on social media ads is important, because those are 2 different stages on the timeline of decision making. And while you introduce yourself on social media, you convert through your website or a third-party website in Google. So being out there, those are the 2 main channels that I would say. Make sure that you're present. You have your own media, you have your Google ads, you have your social media ads, and you have presence in a few of the most important directories as well.
And this is why going back to having a fantastic reputation is so important, because you really want to establish yourself as, I'm an industry expert, right? Because you're having people having faith in you, and they're taking a chance. When that husband and wife are saying, are we finally going to get into business? Who are they going to get into business with? Somebody who they believe is an industry expert and who has that great reputation, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Are there any marketing trends that new franchisors should be aware of to stay competitive? What's changing?
Well, Google changes the game all the time. So
how do you stay on top of that?
Well, reading, making sure that you're always reading about all the newest innovation, the newest products. Us being present on 5 continents gives us a competitive edge, because every new thing that happens in Google or Facebook or any of those channels first rolls out in the US, and then it rolls out 6 months later in the UK and Europe, and then 6 months later in Asia and the Pacific. So us being able to have this access to early stage of learning, and then be ready and prepared and know what is going to happen is one of our unique selling points, and this is why our clients trust us. But one thing that is incredibly successful on the US market at the moment, and that's not that new, but it's gaining more and more traction every day, is local service ads. It's also known as LSAs. And those are local service ads, are ads that generate calls, phone calls only, with real client inquiries. So if you haven't tried out that yet for any of your locations, and if you're a new franchisor, those are incredibly cost effective because you only pay if you have a genuine lead. So if you get a spam call, or if someone calls you and the call is irrelevant and you don't even quote them, you don't pay for this. You don't pay per click as a traditional Google advertising. You pay per phone call that is an actual lead. So that works out quite cost effective, and the cost per lead is very low, depending on the industry, of course. But I would say definitely try that. We've been running this for franchisors for over a year now, and it is really, really good for them.
This is why you should not try this at home as a new franchisor, and you really do need to have an outside agency that is going to take care of you, because as a new franchisor, we have so many things that we're trying to keep our head above water. We can't stay ahead of the trends, or every time Google changes the algorithm, and this is why you need to bring in an expert.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I get asked this, and this is in the book, do I need an agency? Can I use a freelancer? Can I have my marketing manager? What is the right formula? And there's no right formula.
Right.
Depending on what stage in the business you're at, whether you're just emerging now and you can't afford, having someone on a paycheck full-time as a marketing manager, you don't have those locations yet, that's absolutely fine. You can have someone on retainer, whether that's a freelancer, external to the agency, whether that's external to the business, or that's an agency like us. It can be a retainer, and that can serve as your extended marketing arm that supports you, because it's impossible to hire one person that knows everything about Google Ads, website development, SEO, local service ads, Google My Business, and the list goes on and on and on.
Yeah, in my opinion, if I was to do this business all over again and become a new franchisor, and I had limited budget, there's no question that I would prefer to hire an agency on a fractional basis than hiring a full-time person that I know they can't do everything. No. The expertise that I'm getting so much more, bang for the buck. Dani, let's shift gears here. In your book, you talk about crisis management. So what strategies should new franchisors have in place for effective crisis management communication?
Well, first and foremost, don't get into a critical situation.
Don't let it happen.
Yeah, don't let it happen.
But when it does.
Yeah, but when it does, usually in all critical situations, like, for example, aviation and, important situations, people have checklists. And a lot of franchisors don't like checklists because they don't think they work. Well, they do work, because when you're in a critical situation, you panic. We're human. When we are challenged, we panic, we fold, we think about survival, we get in survival mode, we get in our survival brain. That doesn't necessarily mean, growth. That doesn't necessarily mean customer service.
Right.
So it's always good to have a checklist of, steps you need to follow. And it will happen inevitably. It was a joke. Don't get in a situation. You always get in a situation like that because you work with people. And working with a network of 10, 15, 20, 30, 50 franchisees, it will get messy at some point. I think the most important thing is to be honest. To be honest with yourself, to be honest with your staff, and to be honest with your franchisee network and your end customers. So being out there and saying, I'm sorry, we screwed up, and we take full responsibility for it, and this is what we're going to do for this not to happen again, is much better than whitewashing.
Totally.
And it's the same thing with when you answer a negative review. It's a small screw up by a franchisee, but it has to be answered. And these negative reviews are going to come in. There's no one business that's going to be always perfect and have 5-star reviews only. But when this happens for one location or multiple locations, they need to have this checklist or a process in place on what they need to do, how they need to answer, how to take the conversation offline so that it doesn't cause more damage to the brand, what steps to follow so that they can offer either compensation or a discount from a future service, so that, or maybe even ask the user to, if they rectify the situation, to remove the negative review.
Right.
Because negative reviews can only be removed by the user who wrote the review. Even if it's an unhappy customer, even if it's a customer that was completely out of line and it wasn't your fault, don't start arguing with the customer online. That's not going to help your brand at all.
Those are brutal.
Yeah, it's just going to, continue the negative conversation online. Try to take it down. Try to get 10 or 15 positive reviews to push this down further, and try to be honest about it. Yes, my employee made a mistake. They were having a bad day. We apologize. We want to rectify the situation. We're going to come again and redo the service we did, or we're going to give you a free whatever. Or, there's ways on how to do it. But a lot of the franchisees, they get into the dispute saying, well, I was right. The customer was wrong.
Right.
It's
Yes.
not about that. It's
I've
not
seen
about
that.
that. It's not about that. And this is why you need to have the process and the checklist so that you can step out of your emotional self and think, this is what is useful and good for the business in this situation, because we're all very emotional. If you're a driven, motivated entrepreneur, which I believe everyone is, you get things personally. And sometimes you take it too personally.
Right.
So you need to be able to step outside that and use the process.
So moral of the story is, one, have the process and the policy for crisis management before it happens, so that you can step out of the emotional side of it, right? And when we're dealing with franchisees, knowing we're dealing with emotions, we're dealing with people, it's going to happen.
Yeah, it's inevitable.
And some franchisees are better than others in terms of being able to not take it personal. And we will know that ahead of time too, from our past experience of working with said franchisee.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. Let's talk about the future of franchising. Do you see any future trends in franchising, or how new franchisors need to stay ahead with changes coming, or new industry that you see that's been more popular for you as for your client base?
So there's been a shift in franchising and new emerging franchise industries, especially around the pandemic. That changed a lot. So a lot of stay-at-home, work-from-home sort of businesses emerged. Also technologically, there's advancement with AI. Now we have ChatGPT 4 and all that. So that disrupts every single industry, every single business, including franchising. So I would say it's very difficult for franchisors, especially emerging ones, to stay on top of all the innovation, but and everything that's changing. But as one key advice, I would say sign up for a blog or for a podcast like yours to, have synthesized information, and for you to, be ahead of the curve. Because if you are focused on working in the business, not on it, and not constantly having one ear, to open to new ideas, new trends, you're probably not going to hear about them because you're too focused on the operations of the business. But there's so much that comes up that it's almost impossible for you to keep track of it yourself. So having these sources of information like your podcast or a new book, or even the network, the power of the network of franchising, a lot of people forget about that. You are out there going to meetings with other franchisors, or even having your franchisees and having monthly meetings and committees and so on, exchanging that information. That's going to give you a competitive edge. But mostly we see a shift in terms of using AI for operations, and businesses and franchisors becoming more and more efficient and effective in their operations through AI, and through the use of AI in terms of creating content, marketing communications, email marketing for the network and for end customers, and just using the new tools that come with AI to manage the network.
Sure. Overall, I like to say that one of the keys to success is you have to continue to be a student of the industry. you can never just say I'm an expert and I know it all. Things changing too often. But if you take that approach that I'm a student of the industry and that life is about learning, I think you put yourself in a great position to win.
Yeah, and absolutely right. And you need to be always coachable, even if you're the franchisor.
Definitely.
Humble and coachable, because you're going to learn a lot through the process of franchising.
And we know that some of the best ideas come from our franchisees. It doesn't come from the home office.
That's right.
Yeah. Cool. Dani, if someone was interested in working with you, how could they get in touch with you?
They can find us on our website, franchisefame.com. Same goes for LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram. We're present on all social media networks. I would urge them to read the book. We offer a free PDF download, but if you want the paper copy, it's available at Barnes & Noble and Amazon. There's also a free questionnaire that takes 2 minutes to fill out. That is called Evaluate How Good Your Franchise Marketing Is. And if you're not sure of any of these concepts that we touched upon today, in terms of Google business profiles, or reputation, how good am I with all of this, it's a 2-minute questionnaire that's on the website that you can take. It's a quiz, and then you get a free customized report based on your answers that evaluates your franchise marketing and gives you suggestions on how to improve.
Nice. All right. I finish every podcast with, I call the franchise tip jar, because the community is so generous with sharing of information. And you've done just that here in the past hour. It's been amazing. What advice would you give an entrepreneur, though, that's looking to maybe franchise their business before they dive into franchising? Is there maybe a piece of advice you'd give somebody?
One thing that I would say is don't forget that you are valuable, and the enormous information and advice and knowledge that you hold. Very often, as being a solo entrepreneurs before even franchising, you start to doubt yourself. It's a lonely process. It's a lonely place. And very often we climb those mountain peaks, and we're already on top of one mountain peak, and we're already looking at the other mountain that's higher. And we're like, oh, I want to climb that peak, or I want to climb that peak. And you forget the peak that you've just climbed. You forget the mountain of value you're sitting on. We have enormous amounts of value in us, and very often we're fooled by looking at other people's value, other mountaintops and other peaks, and you're comparing yourselves to them, and we forget how much value we hold. And that's an important advice for every entrepreneur before they even start franchising out, I feel.
That's great advice. That's just great business advice. But even besides franchising, thank you. So Franchise Fame, great read. I highly recommend it. Thanks so much for coming into the studio here today. I appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you for tuning into the Emerging Franchise Brands podcast. For additional insights, guest applications, and to stay connected, visit us at efbpodcast.com. The Emerging Franchise Brands podcast is for entertainment purposes only, and the views expressed do not necessarily represent those of Emerging Franchise Brands, its host Frank Fiume, or Emerging Franchise Group, LLC. Any discussed franchise or investment opportunity requires thorough investigation, obtaining proper disclosure documents, and expert consultation before making any investment decisions. The podcast and its host do not offer professional advice or endorsements, and they hold no responsibility for actions, representations, accuracy, or consequential damages related to the podcast content.